Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief Headlines Edition, all the daily AI news you need in around 5 minutes. And boy, we have a lot today. This is our last normal weekly episode of the summer. Obviously, in the US on Monday, we have Labor Day, and that really kicks off the fall and back to school, back to work, all of the new energy that brings. But this has been anything but a quiet summer when it comes to AI. And so appropriately, we are bursting at the seams. And we start today with the latest reports that Apple might finally be getting serious about an acquisition to solve how woefully behind they are in AI. The information reports that acquisitions have become a serious topic of conversation among the C-suite, with Senior VP of Services Eddie Q championing the idea. Apparently, rather than just licensing with Google to create AI Siri, Eddie wants to go much further. Sources say that, as we've heard in the past, the targets include Mistral AI and Perplexity, and those conversations have been far more than just theoretical. Now, I will remind you that the reason that we talk about this is that historically, Apple has not used acquisitions as a solution to get ahead in a new industry. In fact, to date, their largest acquisition is still Beats headphones in 2014, which was just a $3 billion deal. In other words, like a quarter of what Meta paid for less than half of scale recently. Of course, money isn't a big issue. Apple has about $75 billion in cash on hand, and so has a credible path to buy just about any AI company besides OpenAI, Anthropic, or xAI. Based on the reporting, it seems that Mistral has been seriously considered at the $10 billion valuation they're currently seeking in a venture round. The information sources said that Eddie Q has been asking people inside and outside of Apple what they think of a Mistral deal. However, he has reportedly been dissuaded because Mistral is, quote, not among the top AI model makers. I tend to agree with that. I think at this point, a Mistral deal would not be enough. I think markets would in fact reject it. I continue to think that if they really want to play, Anthropic is where they would need to set their sights. However, at this point, I think that Anthropic's growth just might be too much for them to find a workable deal. What's more, while I don't think Anthropic was ever particularly keen to sell, I think now they have some serious wind in their sails and are even less likely to than before. Still, it is very much the case that every day that Apple waits, their options get more constricted, and the amount that they're going to have to pay does nothing but increase. As Jeff Bezos puts it, they gotta stop talking and start writing checks. Speaking of big lumbering tech giants updating their strategy, Microsoft has taken a big step towards AI independence, unveiling a set of new in-house models. The two models are MAI Voice 1, which is a text-to-speech model, and MAI 1 Preview, which is a non-reasoning LLM. MAI Voice 1 is the focus of the press release and seems state-of-the-art-ish. We don't have any benchmarks so far, but the samples are reasonably impressive. Microsoft says the model can generate up to a minute of audio in under a second running on a single GPU, making it, quote, one of the most efficient speech systems available today. MA1 Preview, meanwhile, is just a standard chatbot LLM, really not much to say about it. The model is currently being benchmarked on LM Arena, and about the best you can say is that it's putting up a decent performance. It's currently ranked at number 13, which is below GPT-4.1 and Grok 3, but ahead of Gemini Flash o1 and Claude Sonnet 4 Thinking, so essentially middle of the pack. Still, realistically, the notable part is that it exists at all, with Microsoft writing, this represents MAI's first foundation model trained end-to-end and offers a glimpse of future offerings inside Copilot. Overall, Microsoft said, we're actively spinning the flywheel to deliver improved models. We'll have much more to share in the coming months. Frankly, I think Microsoft is playing a dangerous game here. I understand why, in the wake of the absolute chaos of a couple years ago's board meeting and firing and rehiring of Sam Altman, they feel the need to get more independence from OpenAI. But for their core business users, there is already a gap between the ChatGPT that they're using with their Gmail accounts at home after hours and what's available to them as enterprise buyers using Copilot. And unless they can seriously move quickly and get these models up to snuff relative to OpenAI's offerings and Google's offerings, etc., I think they're going to have a very difficult time. Speaking of Anthropic, a bunch of stories from them. First, they've released a new agent that lives in a Chrome plugin. Called Claude for Chrome, the product is a browser-using agent that does pretty much all the things you would expect. In their announcement blog post, the company writes, within Anthropic, we've seen appreciable improvements using early versions of Claude for Chrome to manage calendars, schedule meetings, draft email responses, handle routine expense reports, and test new website features. The company is treating this as a pilot test, releasing the agent to a selection of 1,000 Claude Max subscribers. Anthropic does note that they're still very concerned with inherent security issues with web use agents, discussing the risk, for example, of prompt injection attacks. This is something, by the way, that has started to manifest in other web browsing agents that were released earlier. Earlier this month, Brave published a security notice describing a functional attack vector, for example, in Perplexity's Comet browser. Still, ultimately, Anthropic says that they view agentic web browsing as inevitable, and so they are attempting to strike a balance between safety and keeping up with the race. Maybe even bigger news from Anthropic is that the company has settled a copyright class action lawsuit with a group of authors. In a legal filing on Tuesday, Anthropic said that they had negotiated a proposed class settlement. We don't know the terms, but best guessing is that affected authors will see some sort of payout, and Anthropic, for their part, gets to avoid going to a potentially costly trial. This lawsuit was filed last year and claimed that Anthropic used millions of books to build out their training data. In June, the judge ruled that Anthropic's use of copyrighted books in training data was fair use, which was a hugely impactful first-of-its-kind ruling. At the same time, the judge also found that Anthropic had pirated millions of books from the internet rather than purchasing them. Anthropic was set to go to trial over the issue in December, which had them facing fines that could have reached into the hundreds of billions of dollars due to sheer volume. The settlement is expected to be finalized next week, so we will soon learn of the terms, but Justin Nelson, an attorney for the authors, said, "This historic settlement will benefit all class members." Now, it is worth noting that when it comes to broader implications, settlements can't be used as precedents in other cases, meaning that the direct impact is fairly minimal. At the same time, in practice, one settlement begets another, and so there could be some impacts there. IP Scholars V. Rosen writes, "Big news and a win for authors, I think. It doesn't resolve the legal issues, of course, but I suspect we're going to end up with a licensing-oriented détente rather than a clear legal rule." Last Anthropic story. For the first time, the company will be using user data to train their next generation of models. Coming after a big change to their terms of service, the new terms will apply to free, pro, and max plans, but not the variety of enterprise and education plans or API access. Users can also opt out if they don't want Claude training on their data. Anthropic said, "By participating, you'll help us improve model safety, making our systems for detecting harmful content more accurate and less likely to flag harmless conversations. You'll also help future Claude models improve its skills like coding, analysis, and reasoning, ultimately leading to better models for all users." Now, the tech press ran stories about how naive users might not read the fine print and accidentally opt into data sharing. I think, however, a more interesting question is what it means that Anthropic is shifting their policy at this stage in the game. OpenAI insider Rune recently brought up the point that, quote, all model companies were pre-training on the same internet. Of course, Grok has access to Twitter dataset, and Gemini can pre-train on YouTube and so on, but mostly it's the same internet. On the other hand, reinforcement learning environments will be whatever the lab chooses to prioritize, so you should expect more speciation. Indeed, Princeton professor Aravind Narayanan writes, "In an essay a year ago, we observed that more capable models don't necessarily mean more useful products, and that real-world usefulness will require training on user data. In retrospect, I'm surprised Anthropic held out this long." Speaking of this long, that is where we are going to wrap today's headlines. With that, we will move over to the main episode.